I now call Deputy Seán Crowe.
Go to Margaret.
5 minutes.
Go to Margaret. What images or words spring to mind when you think in terms of these institutions? For me, it's cold walls, cold, thick walls, bars on windows, the smell of bleach, cruelty, sadness, terror, poverty, unhappiness, regret, hunger, brutality, abuse, despair, beatings, imprisonment, silence. And it's now 3 years since the Justice for Magdalene circulated an apology and redress scheme for survivors. 22 months since the Irish Human Rights Commission stated that a statutory inquiry into the alleged abuses and provision of redress should immediately begin. 15 months since the UN Committee Against Torture detailed that the state should ensure that within 1 year survivors should obtain a redress. But the government continues to delay, to stall on providing all Magdalene victims with redress and more importantly, an apology. The long delay is unacceptable, but it's made worse when one considers that the survivors of the Laundries are elderly and suffering ill health as a result of their forced incarceration. And some survivors have been refused pension entitlements by the Department of Social Protection. Tonight, as we discussed this motion, it's extremely important that we also remember the survivors of another brutal Christian residential institution who were also failed by this state. The women and children who survived the shocking abuse in Bethany Home are also elderly, and they fought bravely and courageously for an independent inquiry to examine what happened in this residential home, which was opened between 1921 and 72. Earlier this year, when the Residential Statutory Fund Bill was debated, I strongly argued that the separate redress board should be created for both the Magdalene Laundries women and Bethany Home survivors. However, Minister Quinn refused, probably because of the expense, the financial cost to the state, and that Bethany Home was a privately owned mother and baby institution. This doesn't mean that the state was not complicit and failed these women and children. And between 1922 and 49, more than 220 children died in Bethany Home. 219 were buried in an unmarked grave in Mount Jerome Cemetery. I pass this plot very regularly and can't understand why this government will not open an inquiry into how our state failed these defenceless children. It's a bleak spot. No flowers, no markers, no large headstone, no evidence that babies and children that pass so quickly through this life. No daisies, no nothing in relation to it. Just a patch of ground on the ground as you walk by. I was recently there with Minister Costello and some survivors there in relation to it. And the point I made at that time was that we've compounded the hurt of these survivors by not including them in redress. Tonight's debate also reminds me of what Junior Minister Kathleen Lynch said when she was in opposition. She called on the government to do the decent thing and end this outrage. Sentiments that were supported by her cabinet colleagues. Yet these same deputies, these same ministers are in the position to do, in their words, the decent thing. But they're sitting on their hands and refusing to honour the promises to the elderly survivors of this institution. The list of horrendous abuse in Bethany Home is a long and disturbing list, yet we can't shy away from this black episode in the state's history. In October 1939, an inspection of Bethany Homes, it was found that 14 infants had died since the last inspection of the premises, and there were 57 children living at the home at the time. In the same year, a report from an inspector in Monaghan on children boarded out from Bethany Home found that children were insufficiently clad, unwashed for weeks, and one sick and neglected child didn't have their nappy changed for weeks.
Half a minute left.
The state refused to act, suppress the truth, and just ordered the home to stop admitting Catholics. There's no evidence that no one child died. There's evidence that one child died every 3 weeks between 1935 and 1940. So I suppose I'm asking what other speakers said when this debate was going to. I'm asking, can we do the decent thing? I haven't heard any answers from the benches across the way here. I haven't heard any solutions in relation to it. We need to do the decent thing. We need to stand up to the plate for these people. We need to, certainly from tonight, we need to apologise on behalf of the state, and we need to bring redress to these elderly people that were suffered in these homes. And they need
Thank you, Deputy.